Alright, what's up guys? In today's video, we're going to take a look at an in-depth review of the RAM-7 assault rifle. This is one of the best mobility assault rifles as well as one of the fastest killing weapons in the game. In my personal opinion, after playing with this weapon and testing it, it is best for players that like to rush a lot. It actually kills faster than the M4. We're going to break down all the attachments, tell you guys which ones are the best to use for it, which ones are the ones you should completely avoid, and then obviously take a look at that best class setup. The first thing about this is to talk about the barrels. You have the Ranger, the Eclipse, and the compact barrel. This is probably the first gun I'm going to be recommending all three barrels on this gun. They all have an excellent positive for a very minimal negative in my experience with them. So with that compact barrel, which is a short barrel, you're going to get out 10% less range for 1% faster movement, 4% faster stray speed, and a slightly slower aim down sight time. As far as what's bad about it, you get a slightly worse hipfire, which you guys can see on the screen, and a slightly worse recoil pattern, which in my experience testing it is very minimal. It keeps this gun excellent. This gun is very good for rushing, so it keeps this as a very good rushing weapon. So it's definitely 100% I recommend it. As far as talking about the most popular barrel, which is the Ranger, you get about 40% more range, which is a pretty good increase. Only 2% slower movement speed, which is excellent for a long barrel. Usually the longest long barrels give you about 4% slower movement speed, so 2% is excellent. Your stray speed is only about 6% slower, which is still some of the best I've seen. Normally you get between 8 and 10%. So the two slowest parts about it are very good. The biggest negative is your aim down sight time goes down by about 4 frames, which is definitely very noticeable. You go from about 234 milliseconds to 300 milliseconds, which is a big negative, and your hip fire spread goes down by a significant amount. But you do get a very good increase to your overall recoil pattern, which you guys can see on the screen right now. So I 100% recommend this barrel as well. As far as talking about the Eclipse barrel, your aim down sight time goes down slightly. You also get a slight increase to your overall movement speed, which helps a bit. In exchange, you get a slightly worse hip fire, and you also get about 30% more range. It very well stacks up to that Ranger, so I definitely 100% recommend this barrel as well. You get a slightly worse aim down sight time, faster movement, a lot more range, and that's it. Obviously, you get no increase to recoil, but this barrel, in my opinion, is excellent. It's probably my favorite barrel to use on the RAM-7. So as far as talking about the grips, this is probably the most important category for me because the RAM-7 does have a somewhat unique recoil pattern where it pulls up and then drags hard to the left, which is pretty unique. Most weapons go up and to the right. So what I did is I tested the grips on their own, just with the grip alone, and then I tested it with the Ranger to see if it made a biggest difference. The one thing to note about the RAM-7, it does have the fastest aim down sight time and the fastest straight speed. So those two grips, which is the Ranger and the MERC, which counter that, in my opinion, are the best to use because it makes the RAM-7 a little bit worse where it's already amazing, so it's not going to be noticed as much. The one thing you will note is you guys can see on the screen now the recoil patterns of the Compensator, the Commando, the MERC, and the Ranger. You guys will notice this gun has a very stable recoil pattern. The Commando, this is probably the first time you guys are going to hear me say it, is actually useless. It gives you a slightly less kick, a slightly more stable recoil, but those are two things where the RAM-7 is pretty good at, and it's kind of very hard to even notice what it does. You guys can see with the MERC, you get less kick and a more stable recoil. Same with the Ranger, less kick, a more stable recoil. So these are two best grips I recommend. The biggest difference is the MERC actually has no effect on your hip fire spread. You guys can see on the screen right now. And the Ranger actually has no effect on your idle sway unless it's stacked with like a tack laser or the stock. So those two things about the two barrels is kind of useless. The Ranger does have a slightly worse stray speed, which this gun has the best, so you still kind of want to keep it good in that stray speed. So I recommend the MERC as my #1 attachment. With the Compensator, you get a slightly worse idle sway. You get obviously the least amount of recoil, but in order to get a slower aim down sight time and worse idle sway, and obviously you can't use a suppressor, I really only recommend this to be used in multiplayer. And as far as the last one, which is the tactical foregrip, you guys can see you actually do get a pretty good improvement to your idle sway for a slightly worse movement speed. But with a gun that has a pretty hard to control recoil, you definitely want a grip on there. So I recommend this as probably the last attachment you guys are going to be picking. So as far as talking about the unique attachments, we have the CQC stock, the tack laser, and then we have the idle sway stock, which gives your idle sway a little bit better. The CQC stock gives you an amazing improvement to your aim down sight time by about 20%, which is excellent. I 100% recommend this. It is the only thing you guys will be using to improve your aim down sight time besides attack laser. Obviously, there's no stock on this gun, which to me is a big negative. I 100% recommend the CQC stock. The attack laser gets a same thing, about a 20% faster aim down sight time. You also get a very good improvement to your idle sway, and obviously an improvement to your aim walking steadiness. I recommend this is probably the best attachment for the RAM-7. This gun is best when rushing. The attack laser, after you guys have done some testing on it, is actually kind of hard to detect. If you guys are rushing, playing very aggressive in Warzone, it's definitely an excellent attachment. It's going to improve your aim down sight time and your idle sway, which is going to greatly increase your mobility and your overall accuracy. And as far as the idle sway stock, this is actually one of the most underrated attachments, probably the best attachment in my experience as far as improvement you get. Your idle sway basically goes from somewhat movable to basically zero. It doesn't move at all with this. You guys can see on the screen right now. You also get a slightly slower strafe speed, which, like I said, the RAM-7 has the best strafe speed. So the negative about it is already where the RAM-7 is best. In exchange, you get basically zero recoil. I 100% recommend this as one of the best attachments to use. It's definitely very good. Helps your overall accuracy. If you were to stack it like the Ranger long barrel and a MERC foregrip, you'd get no recoil while also having no idle sway. So it's definitely an excellent attachment. As far as the stipple grip, slightly improved sprint out time, only about 7% faster, and a 15% faster aim down sight time. So when you compare that to the CQC stock and the attack laser, it's obviously not as fast aim down sight time for a slightly faster sprint out. It also makes your idle sway worse, which is your overall accuracy, which is kind of where this gun lacks. So it's slight improvement for a slight negative, so I really don't recommend it. So the one thing to note here is on every single class setup, I'm going to be recommending the red dot, which I, like my dumbass, forgot to mention in the beginning. The red dot is, in my opinion, the best attachment. The one thing for me is when I was trying out the RAM-7, I couldn't find any good class setups. After I put the red dot on there, I found myself thoroughly enjoying using this weapon. So each class setup is going to be built the same way. We have the monolith suppressor with the red dot, with the 50 round mag and the MERC foregrip. In my opinion, this is a very simple gun. It has a very limited set of attachments. So every class setup is going to be the same. The biggest difference is going to be that barrel, which one you guys prefer. Like I said, the Eclipse gives you a great increase in range. The compact barrel gives you a great increase in mobility. Going to make it best for rushing, and the Ranger obviously gives you a great increase in your recoil and your range to make it better for long range. But I recommend basically just switching the barrel out and running the same 4 attachments. If you guys don't like the red dot, I do recommend the stability stock because it does greatly increase your idle sway, which helps you hit your first shot, which in my opinion is one of the most underrated parts about your accuracies. That's pretty much it for today's video. Definitely pretty surprised me about the RAM-7 is these attachments are somewhat overrated. Some of them are very underrated, which is probably why you're struggling to find the best class, kind of like I was. It was very hard for me to find a good class. It took me about 4 or 5 hours to finally find what I enjoyed. I had to test them a lot. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. If you guys did, make sure you guys do leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.